Okay, leg curl is another exercise that works the hamstrings. What you see here is a seated leg curl machine. There's really not much to this exercise. Position yourself properly in the machine, then contract your hamstrings and flex the knees. Bring your heels towards your butt and then hold for a beat at the bottom position. Another variation of this exercise is you can do this one leg at a time, as you can see here. One quick note on form here. Don't let your back round out as you are bringing your heels in towards your butt. Some people let their hips slide forward as they're bringing their heels in, thus rounding out their low back. There should be no movement here at all in the body except for the knee joint. Make sure you brace yourself nice and tight in the machine to prevent any kind of rounding out of the low back. Okay, let's take a look at exercise 4 now, dynamic calf work. Perhaps a better description would be to call it dynamic lower leg work. There's a couple of exercises I like to do to help work on my dynamic stabilization. They're pretty simple exercises, don't require any equipment. One is the one-legged swing and one is the side jump. Let's take a look at the one-legged swing first here. Basically the exercise is pretty simple. All you're doing is you're standing on one leg while you are swinging the other leg up and down. This will require dynamic stabilization in the leg that you're standing on. You're going to have to get nice and tense. You have to tense all the muscles in that leg to prevent you from falling over as your leg is swinging up and down. Let's take a quick look at the exercise itself here. Okay, I start by just swinging my leg forward and back a little bit, not too high, not too fast. This is how I recommend you start. Just get used to the balance, get used to having to produce tension in your leg, the leg you're standing on, while your other leg is swinging. This is the way you want to warm up. And then as you feel comfortable with the balance, and as you're able to balance just by swinging forward a little bit, then you can swing your leg higher up and swing your leg faster, as you can see here in a second. Okay, here I am. I'm starting to swing my leg higher up, and I'm starting to swing it faster now. This will increase the difficulty of the exercise. The leg that I'm standing on, I'm going to have to be producing a lot of tension in that leg to prevent myself from falling over as I swing my leg higher and faster. This is how you make the exercise more difficult, by swinging higher and faster. One quick note on form here. What you don't want to have is your low back thrust violently into an arched or rounded position as your leg swings back. This happens because as your leg swings back, your pelvis is violently rotated forward, thus forcing your low back into an arched or rounded position. This isn't good for your low back. The way to try and avoid this is make sure you tension your abdominals, get them nice and tense so that they stabilize the position of the pelvis while your leg is swinging forward and back. This will help prevent that violent rounding of the back as you're swinging your leg. And one other thing, the leg that you're standing on should have its knee bent. You don't want to have your knee locked straight. It's very difficult to maintain your balance if you have your knee in that locked position. And here I am finishing up the swing. Okay, in terms of sets and reps, I don't have any sets or rep charts for this exercise. They're not really necessary. Basically, all I want you to do is do your first set once on each leg, where you're just swinging your leg forward a little bit. Not too high, not too fast. Use it as a warm-up. Just get used to the balance. And like I said, we'll use this as your warm-up set for your next round. Go a little bit higher, perhaps a little bit faster, perhaps not to your maximum ability, but just use this as progression. And then for your last couple of sets, try and push yourself. Try and go as high as you can, try and go as fast as you can without toppling over. This will be good enough for your dynamic stabilization work. Let's take a look now at the side jump. Okay, the side jump is exactly what it sounds like. You'll literally be jumping from side to side. You'll be standing on one leg to start, and then you'll be jumping as far as you can onto your other leg. So you'll only be on one leg during this exercise at any particular time. Now what I like to do in this exercise to start off with, I like to do a little bit of a warm-up / progression. I stand with shoulder feet apart, and then I stand on one leg and simply jump a little bit off to the side, like you can see here. Nothing crazy, nothing challenging, just getting myself used to the balance, used to the movement, and then as I progress, I jump a little bit farther out each time. This acts as a bit of a progression, gets me used to a little bit of a bigger jump, and gets me ready for the big jumps to come later. This is how I warm up. After one or two of these warm-ups, I move on to the real thing, and I try and jump as far as I can, side to side. Notice in these jumps I am bending my knees, dropping my butt a little bit. I don't stand straight upright. Trying, like I said again, jump as far as you can, side to side, without losing your balance, without letting your other foot touch the ground. Getting my arms out for balance, etc. And for one set, I try to do 4 to 6 jumps on either side. So that is the side jump. In terms of total number of sets, once again, I like to do 1, maybe 2 warm-ups, and then do 2 sets where I try and go as far as I can, 4 to 6 jumps per leg. Okay, so in closing, for exercise 4, workout C, your dynamic lower leg work or dynamic calf work, you have a choice of either doing the one-legged swing or the side jump, and do the exercises as demonstrated. Let's move on now to abdominal exercises. Okay, all the abdominal exercises for this workout are contained in this section. In workout A and in workout C, you're required to do abdominal exercises. In workout A, you'll be focusing on the obliques. These are the internal and external obliques. These are muscles that are located more towards the sides of the trunk. And in workout C, you're going to have abdominal exercises that'll be focusing more on the rectus abdominis. These rectus abdominis muscles are abdominal muscles that are located in the center of the trunk. I'm going to be giving you 3 different oblique exercises and 4 different exercises for the rectus abdominis. Your job is to pick 2 of them and then do them whenever it's time to do those exercises in the program. Let's start off by looking at the exercises for the obliques. Okay, your obliques are involved in 3 main movement patterns: rotation of the trunk, prevention of rotation of the trunk, and lateral flexion, which means when you bend your trunk to the side. We'll be introducing exercises here that work all 3 of these functions. We're going to start off with the standing cable rotation. Now what you see here in this picture is the start position for the standing cable rotation. When you do this exercise, you need an adjustable cable machine. Adjust the cable so that's about shoulder height to start off with, and make sure you get your feet wide apart. You want a wide base of support for this exercise. Let's take a look and see how it's done. Okay, here we have a standing cable rotation. A couple of things I want to mention about form. First of all, you notice that my arms are always straight. I never bend my arms or change the angle of my arms. This is to prevent the temptation to pull with the arms. I always want to try and initiate the movement by activating my abdominals. Another thing you'll see me doing here is I'm always looking at the handles. If I'm looking at the handles, then my head is moving as well. If my head moves, my body will rotate. So this is what you should also try and do. Always look at the handles when you're doing this exercise. This is an exercise that actually works a lot of different parts of your body, especially as it starts to get heavier. When it starts to get heavier, you have to grip that bar or the handle nice and tight. Your lower body is going to have to get really, really tense in order to keep you stable and not being pulled back into the cable machine. And of course, your abs will be working. So as you get heavier with this exercise, you'll understand that this really is, perhaps you can say, a whole body exercise. So the standing cable rotation involves rotation of the trunk. Let's move on now to an exercise that involves lateral flexion, which is the side bend. Okay, the side bend is a pretty straightforward exercise. You're literally just going to be bending to the side, standing up in the starting position, holding a dumbbell on one hand, and you're simply letting your trunk fall to the side and coming back up again. Now, one thing I want to point out here is that you want to make this the axis of rotation, the center of your trunk. As you can see by this arrow here. You don't want to start bending over at the hip, as you can see with this arrow here. So just keep that in mind as you perform this exercise. Also, make sure you grip the dumbbell nice and tight, and make sure you tension your lower legs as you do this exercise to keep everything nice and stable. And you can also do this exercise with a cable machine if you prefer it that way. The reason I'm standing on the step is so that the weight doesn't rest on the stack every time I bend to the side. Let's take a look now at the one arm push-up hold. Okay, for the one arm push-up hold, you'll be getting into a push-up type position and simply lifting one arm up off the floor a couple of inches and holding that position for a period of time. Usually what I like to do is I like to hold for about 5 seconds. Okay, let's mention a couple of things about setup and form here. In terms of setup, start off with your feet reasonably wide apart, wider than you would be in a normal push-up. Also, have your hands a little bit closer than you normally would have in a push-up. What I'd like you to do is set your hands up directly beneath your shoulders. When you're performing the exercise itself, as you lift your hand up, there's a couple of things I want you to make sure you try not to do. First of all, as you lift your hand up, don't let your hips shift over to the side to shift your weight onto the hand that is in contact with the floor. And also, as you lift your hand up, don't hike up that hip. These are the two most common things that people will do to try and quote-unquote cheat when they're performing this exercise. So try to be aware of this and try to avoid it. Now the whole point of this exercise is to make sure you keep your body completely still as you lift up that hand. One of the things that will determine the difficulty of this exercise is the position of your feet. The wider apart your feet are, the easier it will be to keep everything completely still as you lift up that hand. If you want to make the exercise more difficult, bring your feet closer in together. Now this exercise is, you may think this exercise doesn't look like all that much, but is actually more difficult than you might think, especially if you've never done it before. So once again, one of the ways you can make this exercise more difficult, bring your feet in closer, and once again, try to keep your body completely still as you lift up that hand. That's the challenge in this exercise. Another way to increase the difficulty of this exercise is to keep your feet always in the same position, but as you can see from this video coming up, instead of just having your hand lifting up off the floor, grab a dumbbell in that hand and lift that up off the floor. Now the same rules apply if you're doing it this way. As you lift the dumbbell up, make sure not to let your hips shift to the side and not to let your hips hike up. In a minute here, you're going to see what not to do. As I lift the dumbbell up, you see that my right hip is way above my left hip. This is what you want to try to avoid. You want to make sure that as you do this exercise, your hips are in line across your body, that one butt cheek isn't higher than the other. As you can see, if you look at this line, one butt cheek is way higher than the other. This is what you want to try to avoid when you are lifting your dumbbell up. Okay, so there you have 3 exercises for the obliques. In workout A, when you are required to do abdominal exercises, you'll be picking 2 of those 3 exercises and using them for your workout. Now workout C also requires ab work. We'll be focusing more on the rectus abdominis in workout C. I'll be giving you a number of exercises for your rectus abdominis. Your job is to pick 2 of them and use them whenever that part of the workout comes up in your schedule. Let's start off by looking at crunches. Okay, most people do crunches off the floor. I prefer not to do that, however. The reason being is that the range of motion in the abdominals extends roughly 30 degrees past parallel to the floor, which means that if you do them on the floor, you aren't working your abdominals in the full range of motion. In order to solve this problem, you can use a Swiss ball, as you can see here. And by leaning over the end of the ball, you can achieve that extra 30 degrees or so range of motion when you exercise your abdominals.